In Micah we read, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God?" I think people love this passage for a lot of reasons. One is its essential egalitarianism. Offering thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of oil is something that only the very rich can do. But we can all be just. Another is the essential humanity of that statement. It cuts past the big, grand, showy things to the deeper qualities, to the aspirations that we all hold, to our best self. And it also pushes past the idea that to be good, you have to be sacrificial. That loving God somehow involves giving up what's dear to you. Now, this was an era in which child sacrifice was actually a real thing. And you can imagine that twisted idea that to show God my devotion, I have to give up what is dearest to me in a painful way, as if that would please God. And this is saying, well, that's not called for. And we know, of course, that there is sacrifice when we have to work through our ego and give up short-term pleasure. But the Lord doesn't ask anything that harms us. In fact, he's giving us joy. So the nation's been mourning the passing of a beloved queen. Someone who did have the wealth to give thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of oil. And she did sacrifice in ways that are unimaginable to most of us. I mean, how many of you have looked at the schedule that she carried on into her 90s? The official schedule, just for the last couple of years, shows that she was averaging an event every single day, public event, plus all of the many, many other things that she took on. She didn't get to live the way most people in their 90s do. And yet for all that wealth, for all that influence, and for even the sacrifice, I would guess that that's not what we honor her for. It's for the deeper qualities that look a lot more like what Micah declared the Lord wants. What she did was not glamorous, it was regal. And there's a big difference between those two, isn't there? And that's a powerful quality in theological terms because it reaches back to something that we all need spiritually, which is that there's someone in charge who is safe, who's just, who's going to do it the right way, which is of an iffy quality in the world, in our rulers today. As I mentioned on the Jubilee weekend, kings and queens represent the Lord in the same way that priests do. Priests represent the divine goodness coming forward. The church is encouraging us to obey the rules of love, the 10 Commandments, the 2 great commandments, love the Lord, love the neighbor. It's all about how do we bring love into our world. And royalty depicts the power of truth. And the majesty of truth is depicted in the rules the civil state puts out for us. To make society work, we bow to those rules, just like you bow to a sovereign. And you do that whether or not you feel like it, because it's called for, it's expected, it's demanded, in fact. And I believe part of what made Queen Elizabeth such a beloved monarch is that she embodied that calm, consistent, safe presence that the proper rule of law engenders in us. Her keep calm and carry on demeanor is what we would wish for all of our rulers, for all of our governors, that steady anchor in the storms. And even the fact that we don't actually know who she was as a personality is part of that. We know she liked dogs. We know she liked horses. Relatively few other things. But, she kept her personal character very quiet. And she came to embody that role of the queen. That was an indicator of how seriously she took that role. All of us have varying degrees of commitment to the truth. At any given moment, it might be strong, it might be weak. And when we're in those times of weakness, it's particularly important for us to have people outside of us who stand for what is right, who stand for what is good, who show the kind of behavior that we might aspire to. New Church teaching has a very strong body of teaching which is about being useful. We're born to be useful. Reading now, everyone, no matter who, must perform in the next life a use for the sole purpose for which a person is born, is that he may perform a use to the community he's in and to his neighbor while he lives in the world, and in the next life may perform a use according to the Lord's gracious purposes. We live to serve, to make a difference. And anything that does not involve making a difference in others' lives is actually a distraction. Now, obviously, we do a lot of things that aren't directly served. We watch movies, we play silly games, we have fun, we go out to eat, we do all kinds of things that don't seem like they're serving anything. But part of the reason we do that is to refresh our minds, to rest, to enjoy, so that we do have an opportunity to make a difference. And that is equally true of people who are retired as people who are doing something really obvious, with a day job or taking care of children or something that's really obviously of service. We're here to make a difference. And that's because all of our lasting happiness comes from being of service. And as I read these passages, I'm speaking more generally, but I think that you can see I picked them because they bear well on Queen Elizabeth and who she was. Some spirits think that heaven and heavenly joy consists in a life of ease in which they are waited on by others. But they're told that happiness in no way consists in being inactive and finding happiness in that. This would mean that everyone wished to subordinate other people's happiness to his own, and when everybody wished to do that, nobody would have it. Such a life would not be an active, but a life of idleness in which they would become listless, even though they may be well known that unless one is active, there's no happiness in life. Angelic life consists in usefulness and in good deeds of charity. For angels are never happier than when they're informing and teaching spirits that stream in from the world, or when they're serving people, they're preventing evil spirits with them from overstepping the mark, and inspiring people with what is good. Also when they are arousing from the dead into the life of eternity, and after that introducing souls into heaven. The happiness they find is more than can possibly be described. I find that just a wonderful teaching, especially because a queen could spend an awful lot of time enjoying being catered to, and yet that's not how she appeared to live. And we know that she may or may not be in a position of authority in the next world. Some rulers in New Church teaching, we're told, actually become such an embodiment of that role that they actually continue it in the next life and can serve well because they've formed in their minds and hearts to do that. Others just live as ordinary citizens of their community. Whatever it is, that life of service engenders in each of us a desire to keep on serving and to find happiness in it. One of the conversations I had in the last couple of days was agreeing with someone that I wouldn't want to be royal for anything. To live that kind of life in a fishbowl, to have so many ceremonies, I feel hemmed in by all the traditions. And it just showed that the two of us who were having that conversation, well, we don't love that way of being useful. But to all appearances, it seemed that she did. Or if she didn't, if that's not her heart's desire, well, she sure put on a good, dutiful front, didn't she? She embraced it as a way of making a difference. Or consider this passage. The delight of heaven is not the delight that comes from being great and having position over others, but the delight of being humble and the affection for serving. Word position, because I think in all of our weaker moments we'd like to be in one of those positions where people give us respect, where they don't say those rude things because one just doesn't do it, or they don't try to cheat us, or they don't, wouldn't it be nice to be in that position? But that's not what gives delight. It is that humble position of saying, what can I do to make a difference in spite of the mess? And it brings to mind that oft-quoted statement that her son echoed in his first speech. I declare before you all that my whole life shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we belong. Service is by its nature humble. And anything that is looking to self, notice what I did, that's not service. That's self-promotion. Service is about doing what is good for other people. In Isaiah, the Lord says, say to the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Or as Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them. We can never know what's going on in someone's heart. But the Lord does tell us, look at what the people actually do. Look at the fruits. Look at what they do. And you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on in their spirits. One passage says, the angels make their delight to consist in the fact that they can do good to others without recompense. And to them, it is sufficient recompense just to be allowed to do good to others. Isn't that a wonderful aspiration? I say it as an aspiration because I'm guessing that all of us have experienced that at times. Sometimes just doing the good thing is its own delight. And yet while we live in this world, there's that part of us that would like to be noticed, that would like to be appreciated, that would like perhaps more than our due. And to the extent that we keep on going back and saying, I just want to make a difference, the Lord changes us. One of the things that we can do when we see someone who embodies a quality powerfully is we can ask ourselves how I can embody it better. So one of the best ways that you could honor her life is actually to look at your own life and say, well, in what ways could I serve more comprehensively in my life as she did? In what way can I make it so that my life isn't just looking forward to the next holiday, to the next break from service, but is somehow finding joy in the service itself? And some jobs are just plain onerous, we know that. But I should imagine that all of us could learn to embrace those opportunities, even just giving the smile to someone when they serve us is a gift. It's an act of service in return. Now, Her Majesty has moved on to a better world, a world without the strife that we face here, and she will carry with her her deeds and intentions. There's this lovely passage that says, everyone after death is judged by the things he or she has done. These are not charged up against him, but show themselves in his continuing way of life. For death is a continuation of life, though after death a person cannot be reformed. I love that way of putting it, because the Lord does not care what you did yesterday or last month, or perhaps that horrific thing that you did some years ago. And a lot of people have those things that haunt them. The Lord is not concerned about those in the slightest. He is concerned with the person that you choose to be now, because that's the person you're choosing to be to eternity. And it's the way you act and continue to act, not any past deeds, that determines your eternal lot. There's no UK in the next world, is there? So when someone dedicates their life to a country, there's a shift that takes place. We read in True Christian Religion, loving one's country is loving the public welfare. One's country is the neighbor because it's like a parent. For one is born in it, and it has nourished him, and it continues to nourish him and protect him. And people ought to do good to their country for a love of it. And then it goes on to talk about the well-known principle that, we love our country so that in time of need we will sacrifice ourselves for it, sometimes even laying down one's life. And ends, it should be known that those who love their country and those who love the Lord's kingdom love the Lord himself, because the Lord is the all in all of that kingdom. And, people who in this world love their country love the Lord's kingdom. So you and I could point to so many faults in our country or any country, couldn't we? And often we do, can take great delight in pointing out the things that aren't right. Those who have worked to try fix it, to make it better, to serve it, go on to love the Lord's kingdom. And my sense is that they have a broader love for the Lord's kingdom than most of us, because we focus on our little areas of service. But somebody who's taken the whole good of the country has that view that they carry with them of the whole good of all in heaven. Something I've heard so many times in the last several days, and I don't know how many Facebook memes I've seen of it, is that Elizabeth, no longer Queen Elizabeth, is going to meet no longer Prince Philip, but her husband. Another human being that she loved. We read that those who during their lifetime have found happiness in marriage because of genuine married love find happiness again in the next life, so that the happiness experienced by them is, in one life, is continued into that of the other, where there is a union of minds in which heaven consists. I've been told that even the most general types of heavenly and spiritual happiness from that union are unlimited in number. So we've been talking about that outward-looking nature of usefulness. And that is so powerful. It's why we exist. And yet there's also this other side, which is the Lord has given, if not in this world, definitely in the next, an eternal companion to share our journey. Someone who complements us perfectly, who brings out our strengths, who mitigates our weaknesses, and who serves with us, enhancing what we bring. I think that's part of the reason why we all automatically, when someone has gone on, say, oh, they're going to meet their beloved, because we know that that is so essential to our being. I read from the Psalms today about the Lord's providence, how he brings good things to people who serve, no matter how imperfectly. Many of you, I think, know the poem that Elizabeth's father, King George, read in 1939 in a broadcast at a time of great uncertainty for the nation. And you may know that it was, in point of fact, 13-year-old Elizabeth who had brought it to her father's attention. And I'm going to read it now because I think that we live in a time of a fair amount of uncertainty, as you know, just in the world, with war, with lots of financial struggles, with people turning away from what seemed like obvious values. And this is bringing us back to the idea of that we're looking at the wrong things. This is The Gate of the Year by Minnie Louise Haskins. God knows. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light, that I may tread safely into the unknown." And he replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way." So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, trod gladly into the night. And he led me towards the hills and the breaking of the day in the lone east. So heart, be still. What need our little life, our human life, to know if God hath comprehension? In all the dizzy strife of things both high and low, God hideth his intention. God knows. His will is best. The stretch of years which wind ahead, so dim to our imperfect vision, are clear to God. Our fears are premature. In him all time hath full provision. Then rest until God moves to lift the veil from our impatient eyes, when, as the sweeter features of life's stern face we hail, fair beyond all surmise, God's thought around his creatures our mind shall fill. I think that we can all say with full assent about her life, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And as her son said, may flights of angels carry her to her rest. Amen.